I think we've all experienced inflation right now. How many of you have felt inflation in the last year or two? Go ahead and raise your hand real high. Go ahead, raise your hands real high. I want you to feel, have you felt inflation? Yeah. It's just starting. It's just fucking starting. What people don't understand is what we just did in 2020 by printing $6 trillion in one fucking year. $6 trillion. Do you know how much that is? Do you know how big of a stack of cash you have to have for $6 trillion? We just print it like there's no consequence. There is a consequence. Inflation, a lot of people call it the silent killer. I call it the democracy killer. Inflation destroys democracy. In the times of Rome, if you study history in the times of Rome, guess what? They inflated their money. It was one of the greatest things that led to the fall of Rome, was that their dollar was inflated. They lost the middle class because now it was rarely difficult to afford a regular lifestyle. That's what inflation does. Let's go to this next one here. Back in 1970, if you just do the math, you could afford the same lifestyle making minimum wage back in 1970 as someone who makes 6 figures today. If you make, I want you to hear me out on that. Listen to that. If you made 6 figures, that's $100,000 a year today, you could afford the same lifestyle as someone in 1970 who made minimum wage. That's flipping burgers at McDonald's, for fuck's sakes. You know, look at the numbers. If you made minimum wage, you could afford the same relative size of house, the same amount of cars. You could go on the same relative amount of vacations. Average cost in the U.S. of the home back in 1970 was $26,000. What is it today? $320,000. 10, 20 years from now. Oh, by the way, how many of you ever have gone through the process of trying to buy a house in the last year or two? Just a year or two. Go ahead and raise your hand if you've tried it. Again, I'm going to say it again. What a bitch of a process that is, right? And how much more difficult is it just to buy a regular home? It's not going to get any better. We've just now begun. Usually you don't feel the effects of something like what we've done in this country to our currency for another 6, even 10 years. You're feeling it now. 5, 10 years from now, you're going to be really feeling it. Our dollar is dying. The middle class, I said it yesterday, is dead. It's dead. It's not even dying, it's dead. It's just a matter of how fast are we going to start burying the graves. What do I mean by that? Well, when I say inflation is a democracy killer, this is what inflation does. Inflation makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. That's what inflation does. You go to any other country and you see shit like this. On one side of the street, it's poverty. I mean, you're talking about maybe 10 people living in one of those little shacks right there. How many of you have been to another country and you've seen this? It's bad. And go look at it. What is one of their dollars compared to ours? That's inflation. That's what we're talking about here. But guess what? You go to those same really poor countries, there's also a crazy amount of wealth. In a very small portion, there's insane amounts of wealth. Insane. You ever been to Sao Paulo, Brazil? The wealthy there are crazy insane. Lamborghinis, Ferraris, super wealthy. Same with Mexico. Mexico, there's a lot of money in Mexico. I don't think people realize that. There's a lot of money in Africa too. It's just controlled by a very small portion of people. The people who just understood how to stay on top of this shit, okay? So when I say inflation is probably the biggest problem, it is. It's something we have to stay on top. We have to understand because it's just happening. There's nothing you can do about it, by the way, except for get your shit straight, okay? Again, what I told you about printing money, we're still doing this. We're still printing. We keep passing all this shit, and when I say politicians are puppets, they're also dumbasses. I don't know if you know that. Look at that. Look at that. We used to talk about it like printing money at these phases was bad. Look at this. We keep doing this. This is an older chart. This just shows 2020. We're in 2022 now. 2021 numbers came back. It was relatively similar. If you guys don't believe me, wages never, ever, ever, and when I mean wages, What do I mean? What do I mean by wages? W-2 employees never keeps up with inflation. In the history of the world, wages never go up with inflation. Everyone needs to understand this. I've heard people, and by the way, I'm not shitting on any certain presidency, because I don't know what ours is called today, if you call it a presidency, but they try to act like these numbers are awesome. Oh yeah, the average income has gone up by, how much percentage? Yeah, has it? Why do you think that is? Because everything's going up. Look at the average cost of living in the U.S. Look at the college education costs. Healthcare costs? Oh my gosh. We could have a seminar for 2 or 3 days just talking about the healthcare problem. The cost of healthcare. How to solve that. What a shit show that is. Just to go to the hospital, just to get an ambulance ride. Anyone know how much it costs to get an ambulance ride? Okay, what's the number? That's the thing. We're talking $10,000+. I know it doesn't cost them that much to do it. It's gas. It's just they're paying for gas one way or the other. They already got those people on salary. Maybe they put a little fluids in you. I was down in Tulum. We paid for some fluids. They're not that expensive. When I mean fluids, recovery. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about there. It's all good. Just to kind of give you guys, I really just want to make sure this is understood. This is what will kill our democracy. This is what is going to kill our democracy, because when I say the middle class does, because if you stay where you're at and you don't make a change, it is going to get more and more and more difficult for you to afford a regular life. Pretty soon, it's going to get more and more difficult to afford your home, your rent. And then what do you start doing? You have to have people live with you. More people living in smaller groups. Where do you see that? Oh, impoverished areas where people all live together because they can already barely afford to live. They can't afford their own place. So you have a bunch of family members and friends all living in the same places. They start conglomerating together, and then you get what we see. You go down to Mexico or Sao Paulo, you go all these places. When you go in the impoverished areas, everyone's on top of each other. Why does that happen? It's because they're trying to share the cost of living. So this is what I believe we are going to see. And if I'm trying to establish in our minds, because I need everyone to understand this, you can't settle for being average, especially with money. You're not going to make it. I don't want to sound all doom and gloom. It's just the truth. I'm not even good with numbers. You can do it. Do the numbers. Pull up your Excel spreadsheets. I don't know, whatever you do, right? Look at the numbers. Look at history. Look at other countries and their history. What do you see? This. I'm trying to put this in our head because why I started my companies, our financial agency, why I put these on, why I do all this stuff, is because I want to promote people to help them escape this. Number one, I believe that you should be great or be nothing. I believe you can make a difference in this world. I believe that this is something that is an epidemic. We have to teach people. We have to help as many people as possible get out of this situation, take ownership of what's happening, and take power back into their own right, because no matter what, this is going to happen. But wouldn't you rather be the person who has set themselves up to be able to help your family and friends and those people who you love? Or would you rather go on one side and just be lazy with it and see whatever happens, happens?